The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Now, let me ask this question. If somebody scans in, I've never done this. I've done scanning to create a PDF image. A lot of people have done that. Real easy to do. If you had created a PDF image of the document, would it have had 9 layers?
No, it would not have. If you scan in just the document, that was one of our tests. That was our benchmark. We took a real birth certificate, simply scanned it in to a computer, into a PDF file. It has only one link, one layer, and that's the entire document. Now, there's arguments out there that certain kinds of compression were used. Raster compression, for one thing, was used. And all compression is we're making a file smaller so you can upload it quicker and easier. Well, we've demonstrated that that kind of compression, OCR or raster, was not used on this document. Because when we ran the compression test, you would get from 45 to 150 different layers, not 9 links and 9 layers. The reason why we're so certain that this is completely manipulated is this has information picked up on as a whole. In other words, a whole a whole date stamp, 8-8-61, is picked up in its entirety. When we run the compression test, it only would pick up pieces of that information, like maybe the dash, or maybe part of the 8, but not the whole block. As a matter of fact, the registrar stamp has never been picked up as a whole block as represented on this document. It busted out to something like 14 different layers during compression. So we know compression wasn't the cause of this. We know the only cause that gives you this effect is human manipulation. Human logic picked up the information that they wanted as whole chunks of information and put it into this layering concept and created the document. And we can prove it.
Now, the certification, last week when you were going through your presentation, you showed how that square, somebody created a square that had the certification in it, and you could see that one image, you could move it around and place it wherever you wanted to, right?
That square you're talking about is the registrar stamp. It is 5 lines of information, if my memory serves me, that you can pick up and move around in its entirety, spin it upside down, and put it anywhere. When we did our initial test on just scanning a document, that's impossible to do. It won't happen.
And so that's probably the clearest indication that a document has been inserted into the Obama birth certificate that appears on the White House website.
It's one of the clearest, and it's got the most significance because that register stamp is what's required to give it its legal authority. Its evidentiary value is being valid
right.
in a testament. It doesn't have that. This document is nothing, and they've given nothing to the American people except an illusion.
Now,
that's what's happened here.
In Hawaii, back in 1961, I've heard stories at the hospital where he was born, Kapiolani maternity ward or something like that. That didn't exist. Is that an accurate contention or not?
No, we've actually found information where it did exist. Okay. Going back to the beginning of this, though, they first cited Queens Medical Center as being the place of birth. Reporters then went to Queens Medical Center, which has all their records, and Queens Medical Center said he wasn't born here, he was never a patient here. So then it was quickly changed to Kapiolani. As fate would have it, Kapiolani Medical Center has never said he was there, never said they had any information of him being there, never said his mother was a patient there, and now they claim that they don't have records because they destroyed their records after 25 years. So they can't tell you whether he was there or not. And we believe that the reason why this certificate had to be reproduced is because they had to include information to back up the same narrative that we've all been told. So they had to create a document that showed Kapiolani as the hospital. Could have been one of the motives for creating the document. The other thing that your listeners need to start to understand is, as everything else with this administration, you're told what to believe. If you go and you start looking for pictures of Barack Obama with his mother or with his father, all you see is a few handful of photographs, and you're told this is mommy and this is daddy. You have no other evidence to support that. Absent of this legitimate birth certificate, there is no evidence to support those claims. So you're told something. There's also evidence that some of those photos have been photoshopped or doctored or altered. So nobody really knows for sure the narrative, including the president by his own admission in his own memoirs. The whole sketch about Stanley Ann Denham and Barack Obama Sr. being married, even to the president, is sketchy. Well, if it's sketchy to you, and we can't verify it, there's a problem someplace.
You know, during the course of your investigation, you checked records regarding flights. Can you relate that to our listeners?
What we wanted to do is we wanted to make an inquiry to see if there was a possibility, because a lot of clamoring was out there, that the president was born in Kenya. We asked the National Archives if they had copies of the manifest from back then. It was Pan Am and TWA, flights from the Pacific back to Hawaii from Kenya. They called us back and they told us they didn't have the manifest, but what they had were INS cards, where anybody that would be coming in would have to fill out one of these cards. They had taken those cards and they microfilmed all those cards. Well, we asked for, I believe it was a 10-year date span, some 685 rolls of microfilms to be copied for us to examine. We sent a researcher down there to do that examination, and what he does is he pulls up the month of July 1961 into September of 1961. Well, as fate would have it, the president's reported birth date is August 4th. The information from those INS cards from August 1st to August 10th was completely missing. Those cards were blacked out. You couldn't see anything. Big gap in the microfilm. The National Archives had no explanation for this. We pursued them for a while, trying to see if they could tell us what happened, research their records, and as of last report, their attorney told them not to answer any more questions regarding this.
Wow.
So the speculation on our end was that this may not, in fact, August 4th may not, in fact, be the birth date. It could be the day that the plane landed, and it possibly that was the date used as a birth date. Because there's conflicting stories. There's a conflicting story with a woman, Susan Blake, who claims Stanley Ann Dunham visited her in Washington State, up Seattle, about the time when Obama would have been about 4 weeks old. She claims that Stanley Ann Dunham came there for a visit and was waiting for a doctor's clearance for her to fly so she could go meet her husband in Boston. Well, there's two problems with this. How would you be waiting for clearance for a doctor to tell you to fly? You can't drive from Hawaii to Seattle. You have to fly. And then the story about her looking to go see her husband in Boston, he wasn't in Boston until a year later, 1962. So that story doesn't work right. But there's a narrative out there that they're trying to convince everybody is real. Well, when you get a big fundamental problem like that, you can't believe the narrative. We have two other witnesses that did put him in Seattle, but they put him in Seattle in September of 1962, approximately between 8 and 1 year of age. So there's a whole missing year that we can't account for.
Mike, you've spent a tremendous amount of time doing this investigation. You know a lot more than you can relate to us in a mere 30 minutes. Certainly you have drawn your own conclusions. Have you done so? And if so, what are they?
You know, the only conclusion I can tell you with 100% certainty is the document is fraudulent. I don't bring my own conclusions into this. I let the evidence take me where it needs to go. And once we prove it, that's my conclusion. So right now I can tell you that the document is fraudulent. I can tell you there would be no reason to make this unless there was some information trying to be hidden or did not exist to begin with. And that could be the only reason for creating this.
And yet that birth certificate is being used by the Obama administration to claim, hey, he's a natural-born citizen. and therefore eligible to run on the Democratic Party ticket as President of the United States, and it's used to raise campaign funds, and that means they're using the mail, they're using wire to obtain funds from all over the country through this document. To me, that sounds like mail and wire fraud.
I would agree with you. I think once this document at some point in time gets adjudicated somewhere, there are going to be some potential, severe problems. Our goal right now is trying to get our information to Congress for Congress to open up an immediate investigation.
Okay, what precisely would you like our listeners to do?
Well, I'd like your listeners to stand by right now. We'll let you know when the time is to start petitioning your representatives to do something. We're in the beginning stages now of making contact with certain congressmen, and hopefully they'll pick up the cause and move forward with it. And we'll let you know when that happens. As a matter of fact, if it does happen, you're going to know because it'll probably make national news. But right now, just stand by and let us put the pieces in place. It's going to take a couple months to do this. And hopefully we can get it there. And then it's going to take a major outcry of the public.
All right. Now, you mentioned litigation, and I don't want to burn up a bunch of time while we have you here now, but you did sign the affidavit in the McGinnis case here in Alabama, and I'm going to talk to our listeners about that. You signed that affidavit, right?
Yes, I did.
Good. Well, so you see that not necessarily a legal action would be the way to bring this about, but the people have got to, at least make this a political issue.
Well, it's not that we don't think a legal action is the way to go. We think the quickest avenue to get the greatest exposure with compulsory powers would rest with Congress. Congress could subpoena people to testify before them. Congress could subpoena you and you'd be under the perjury rule if you lie. So we think Congress is where this really needs to go. It's not so much being political, it's getting to the truth.
Do you think that there's kind of an effort with the officials in Hawaii to they know what's going on and they're trying to cover it up?
I think Hawaii is into this up to their eyeballs. I think that the document that was released to Mr. Obama via his attorneys is not the document that they released to the public, and I believe Hawaii knows all about that. They're just not saying.
And you've had the opportunity to really go over to Hawaii and dig around. And what you're saying right now is supported by a lot of experience on your part.
It's supported by experience on my part. It's also supported by evidence that we have, acquired, and we have direct evidence that really puts you at odds with the story. The story being that they did 2 photocopies of the birth certificate, handed it to Perkins Coie attorney, who flew back to the White House. And the White House has displayed that document. We know for a fact that didn't happen.
Wow. Hey, Mike, the music's come on. I want to thank you for being my guest this afternoon. You've been great, just like you were last week.
Thank you, sir.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.